Leading Ladies is a musical written by two of my friends, Sarah Mateen and Anthony Procopio. It's the real deal. It's a 3-hour, 2-act musical with full book, full score. These two college kids wrote an actual musical. I was super impressed by the material that they put together, and I was also super honored when they asked me to record the very first cast recording of the show last November. So before being hired as the videographer and video editor for this project, my only real film experience was with this YouTube channel. I'm entirely self-taught, I just watch videos on the internet to learn things. I started this YouTube channel a year ago, and so to be perfectly fair, I was rather inexperienced heading into this behemoth 3-hour hybrid movie cast recording production. One of my biggest goals when I started this YouTube channel was to document not only my life, but my growth as a creative. And so I wanted to make this video not only to share the lessons I learned in case you are interested in production or film, but also document this really cool experience. This was like my first film, like an actual big project. There's a budget, there was other people I had to record. This was super cool, so let's get into it. So first, some background about the production. We filmed this in November 2020. COVID-19 restrictions were a thing we had to be aware of. So we had all of the actors and crew tested for COVID-19. All actors and crew were wearing masks unless they were actively being recording, and we did our best to space people inside of the space we had. Speaking of space, no theaters or professional performance spaces would agree to let us record there, so we ended up having to record in the director's house. We did the best we could to turn it into a good recording space. That meant setting up lighting wherever possible, putting rugs down on the floor to make it sound better, and doing minor set decoration as well. All recording was done on 4 days between 2 different weekends. We rented some cameras, hired an audio engineer to record, and also had a 4-member band. Alright, now that you have some context for the show, let's get into a list of the lessons learned. Now, most of these are negative or constructive lessons, things I wish I would have done differently, but if you want a list of positive lessons, I got you. Just go watch the actual show. I'll link it down in the description. One thing I would do differently as the videographer next time is I would be more assertive. When you're on set, things are moving fast, there's a lot of different moving pieces, but your job is to get the best shot possible. There were a couple times throughout the filming process where I filmed something knowing it was wrong, or maybe not wrong, but not ideal, but I didn't say anything because I didn't want to slow down time, or I didn't want to be a burden, or maybe I was just nervous, and looking back, I really regret not saying anything, because while editing and now in the final project, I see that thing that's not perfect, and it would have been a really easy fix to say, hey, can we move where this actor is standing slightly, or can I have a little more time to set up this shot? Things like that. I wish I would be more assertive about the job I have to do with the people I'm working with. Throughout this shoot, we worked with 5 different Canon cameras with 2 different lenses. Now, different footage from different cameras is always going to look slightly different, but I could have done more to make sure that the footage looked similar between the cameras. I didn't pay close enough attention to making sure that my settings were exactly the same on each camera, and therefore, in the final product, you can now see how the shots don't always match when you're cutting back and forth between characters because they're shot on different cameras and they're shot with slightly different settings. More specifically, I did not sync the color temperature between the different cameras, and so you can kind of tell that they just have a different color. Take a look at JR's shirt in this shot here. You can see that it's slightly different colors in these 2 shots. That is because of color temperature, and that is something I could have easily fixed by just paying more attention while I was shooting. I wish I would have spent more time preparing by getting to know the cameras I was going to be using. Heading into the weekend, I'd never shot with a cinema camera before, so when we rented those C100s, I had to spend a good 20 to 30 minutes just figuring out how to turn on and do basic things on the camera. Those are all things I could have done in advance by Googling the manual. Also, this is probably the most obvious and my biggest mistake of the project, but the camera we had on the band was an Insta360 1R, and I did not take enough time to figure out how the settings of those videos worked on my camera, so I ended up using some really low quality clips in the final project, and you can tell, I'm really not proud of that part. The best camera is the one you have. This is a piece of advice I first heard from Matt Diavella, and I really felt it ring true on this project. For as many difficulties as I had with the Canon C100s, I had virtually no difficulties with what I'm filming on now, which is my Canon 90D. That's because I've been using this camera almost every day for over a year, and I know it inside and out. So consequently, in almost every scene, the shot that looks the best is the one that was shot on this camera. Not because it's better than the other ones are technically better, but because I know how to use this one. This is a super simple piece of filmmaking advice, but it's something I was not keeping in mind when I started editing. So when you're cutting back and forth between a shot, most of the time people follow eyes. People are looking at people's eyes in the shot. So when you cut, if possible, you want to make sure that you're keeping the eyes in the same location between shots. When you don't pay enough attention to eye levels, that can confuse your audience. And as an editor, your number one goal should be to have the audience remain in the world of the story and not even notice the editing. I'll say that one more time. As an editor, your number one goal is to have the audience not notice the editing. I used a lot of split screen effects in the final video. That's because I wanted to be able to show two different actors in the same shot when I couldn't physically because of social distancing. While that effect worked out well for the most part, one thing I wish I would have paid more attention to is making sure that different actors were scaled within the frame to the same way. So if you see in my frame right now, it starts at about my chest, goes up to about my head, includes my shoulders. But if we look at some of the shots from the show, we can see that characters are differently sized in different frames, even when they're next to each other on a split screen. In the future, unless I have a really specific reason why, like a character's emotional motivation, I want to make sure that I'm keeping my characters in the same frame so that they match each other, and that lends itself to the world of the story, right? If the characters are in the same frame, that means it's easier for the audience to believe that they are in the same place. This is something I began to touch on earlier, but it truly is so important in narrative filmmaking. When you're watching a movie, you don't want to have to notice every time the camera cuts or think about what is a sound effect versus what is actually happening. You just want to be engrossed in the world of the story, and oftentimes you are when you're watching movies, right? So my goal while editing this was to serve the story first and foremost. By serve the story, I mean keeping the editing as non-intrusive as possible. So what this means, for example, is in a scene between two characters, cutting back and forth when the other one talks. But it's a little more nuanced than that because sometimes you want to show reactions, because in real life, if this were theater, you would be able to see both characters at once. With film, you aren't able to do that, so I had to keep that in mind while editing. This lesson isn't necessarily something I would do differently next time, just something I want to be constantly reminding myself of. Story is king, serve the story. Don't get caught up with your fancy editing, Cassidy. Just do what is best and what is necessary for the story. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Before we began filming this in November, I hadn't been in a theatrical show since I was in high school a year and a half ago. I hadn't been a part of a big creative project since before quarantine, 10 months prior. I was really missing art, and not only that, collaborative art. One of the things I don't get with YouTube and filming by myself is that sense of community. But also, when you put a group of people who are dedicated and talented together, the end result is greater than the sum of our parts. I truly believe that the coolest and most unique part of humans is our ability to collaborate on a large scale. It came at a time in my life where I was really isolated because of the pandemic, right? So I really needed a group to go to, a group of friends to create something with. Moving forward, I know I'll always look back on this show with fondness, not for necessarily what was created, but for who I created it with. It's all about the people for me. I loved working on this project with you guys. I know some of you are going to be watching it, so thank you. Especially, I want to thank Sarah and Anthony for writing it. You guys wrote a musical. That's so cool. I'm so proud of you. Thank you. It's really crazy to see the growth that this project has caused in my video experience. I don't think me in October would believe that I created this come February. The product is bigger than anything else I've ever tried to attempt. I normally just film myself like this in my bedroom. Like, what am I doing filming a musical? But I did it. I learned so much. It is not perfect. There is a lot wrong with it. I know more so than anyone, but it was an amazing, fun experience, and I only want to do it again. If you thought this video was interesting and you're watching it close to when it drops, check out the links in the description because I'm going to put Leading Ladies show dates down there. Go check out the full show. It's got my editing, it's got a superstar cast, and it's a full-length musical written and produced in a pandemic. Go support artists. It's awesome. Thank you for watching this video. If you're new to this channel, yeah, what's up? I'm Cassidy. I make videos about a bunch of different stuff. This channel is more like a creative outlet than it is any specific niche or anything. But if you like that, if you like the stuff I'm saying, consider subscribing because it'd mean a lot to me. I put a lot into my production quality. I'm just trying to learn from this. Check out some of my other videos. I'll put them, you know, in this next part. This is a classic YouTuber outro. Okay, peace out. Bye.